Hi, guys. Today we are going to talk about a retrieved reformation. I hope all of you have had a chance to listen to the story or read the story and do the activities that go with it, because we are going to take it apart piece by piece and find out what we do for love. So in the beginning, we meet Jimmy and he's in prison. He is cocky, he's confident. When the warden accuses him of cracking safes, he answers with an obvious lie. Even though the reader knows this, we like Jimmy anyway because of his charming personality. Before the warden lets Jimmy out, he is given $5, a cheap cigar, and a suit. Now, Jimmy doesn't like any of this, but he is especially offended at the suit. He calls it villainously fitting, which means it should be a crime to wear it. When he gets to Mike Dolan's hotel, he changes into a custom-made and tailored suit, which means that it was sewn just for him. This tells us that Jimmy is used to the finer things in life and that he also has the money to get him those things. While Jimmy is in his room, the author mentions a collar button that is still on the floor. This tells the reader that there was a struggle and also that this is the place where Jimmy was arrested. We are led to the conclusion that Ben Price is a detective and that his interest in Jimmy is to arrest him. They aren't friends. They don't like each other. It's kind of a cops and robbers scenario. He needs to protect the citizens and their money from Jimmy's criminal behavior. So Jimmy leaves the cafe and we kind of lose track of him. But coincidentally, there are several safes that have been opened, wink, wink. Ben Price deduces that Jimmy is the burglar because of his unique criminal signature. And this is straight out of the story. Ben Price knew Jimmy's habits. He had learned them while working on the Springfield case. Long jumps, which means a long time or a lot of distance in between each of the burglaries. Quick getaways. No Confederates, which means he works alone. And a taste for good society. So that means he likes rich people, the things rich people do, and he fits in well with them. So when we get to our rising action, this is where things start going wrong or things start getting exciting. So while on his robbing spree, he stops in Elmore. He has no other reason to be there except he is staying on the move so as to avoid Ben Price. It was pure luck that he happened to look up and see the most beautiful woman he has ever seen. Determined to meet her, he tricks a young boy into revealing her name by asking if she is Polly Simpson, which is just a name he made up on the spot. He knows the little boy is going to say, "No, that's not Polly Simpson. She's Annabelle Adams." So in the time this story was written, which is 1903, women weren't as liberated as they are now, so their reputations were about the only things they had that they could call their own. Because of this, Jimmy knew that he needed to be someone that she could be proud of, someone worthy of her. This is why he completely dropped everything about himself and became Ralph D. Spencer. He was determined to be the kind of man that she deserved. So Jimmy decides right then to stay in Elmore. He wants to be close to Annabelle and, hopefully, win her heart. He has to make a living, though, and the only thing he knows how to do is open safes and make shoes. So he has to rely on his skill that is legal and admirable. So he checks into the motel. He learns that Elmore doesn't have a shoe store, so that sealed his decision. Meanwhile, the store clerk is realizing that, while he thought he was fashionable, Mr. Ralph D. Spencer was much more so. So when we get to this point in the story, O. Henry skips over the details of the last year, choosing instead to summarize what had happened to Jimmy, or Ralph. At the end of a year, the situation of Mr. Ralph Spencer was this. He had won the respect of the community. His shoe store was flourishing, and he and Annabelle were engaged to be married in 2 weeks. Mr. Adams, the typical plodding country banker, approved of Spencer. Annabelle's pride in him almost equaled her affection. He was as much at home in the family of Mr. Adams and that of Annabelle's married sister as if he were already a member. So keep in mind, guys, that they are engaged. They never actually made it to the wedding. So we're going to use this same excerpt to show that Jimmy has changed. He has lived in Elmore for a year. He dated the most popular and probably the richest woman in town, and he ran a straight business. So even though Jimmy had access to the vault, he chose to live that respectable life. We see in this letter that Jimmy writes to an old pal, and we don't know who that old pal is. Just for confidentiality's sake, maybe Jimmy doesn't want us to know who another criminal is. Just his name is Billy. He has given up everything of his old ways except for his toolkit. We also see Jimmy's plan to move west. He needs to keep far away from any city where he committed a crime because he doesn't want anything that he has done in his past to come back to him. He also needs to make sure that Annabelle is protected for many of his criminal ways. After Jimmy wrote that letter, Ben Price arrived in Elmore. He has been looking for Jimmy for a year and somehow must have gotten a tip that Jimmy was in Elmore. The very next morning, Jimmy, or Ralph, goes to Annabelle's house to have breakfast with the Adamses. And this wasn't anything out of the ordinary, and the way it's written, this must happen very often. Jimmy brings his case, which contains heavy safe-cracking tools, because after breakfast and a short trip to the bank, he is going on a train to give his tools to a friend. While at the bank, Annabelle picks up Jimmy's suitcase and realizes how heavy it is. When Annabelle says that she would make a nice drummer, what she means is a salesman. We just don't use the term drummer anymore. Jimmy thinks quickly and responds with nickel-plated shoehorns. And since I'm assuming most of us don't have shoehorns at home, this is a shoehorn. You put the shoehorn in the very heel of your shoe, and you're able to slide your foot in without damaging the back part. Okay, Ben Price enters the bank while all this is going on. He stands out of the way in the front of the bank, but he's close enough that he can see what's going on. Mr. Adams is very proud of a new safe he had just put in, and he wants to show it off to his family. The author makes a point of saying that Jimmy showed a courteous amount of interest. If he was too interested, it would set off alarm bells in Mr. Adams, and it would be rude to show no interest. And while the adults were talking, the two girls were playing with the safe, and May, the older girl, shut Agatha in the safe and then mimicked the motions that she had seen her grandfather do to close and lock the door. The first problem is that in 1903, clocks were wound. There weren't batteries in them. And without a working clock, the door wouldn't open. The second problem was that Mr. Adams hadn't yet set a combination. This means that no matter what numbers were tried, the door would not recognize a combination of numbers that would let it open the door. So without a way to open it, there was no way to save Agatha. It would take a locksmith or a criminal to free the little girl. No ordinary person could open that safe. And in the last line in the excerpt here, there isn't enough air, and besides, she'll go into convulsions from fright. What this means is she'll be scared to death. This little girl was raised privileged, so being locked in a small place without light or sound would have been beyond her comprehension. Now, this is my favorite part of the story. The line, "To a woman, nothing seems quite impossible to the powers of the man she worships," means that to a woman in love, she believes her man can do anything. So she looks at Jimmy and asks him to try, and Jimmy doesn't hesitate. Here's your turning point. This next part shows just how much Jimmy loved Annabelle. He asked for the rose she was wearing, which for us means he needs something to remember her by, because he knows he can't come back from this. He opens his case. He was willing to give up everything he had worked so hard to achieve in order to save the little girl. Once Jimmy opened up the case and revealed the tools, there was no going back. Jimmy knew then that he would have to leave because of Annabelle's reputation, as well as her family's. It would be ruined if she stayed. It would be easier for everyone involved if Jimmy just disappeared after he saved the little girl. So now we go to our ending part. After Agatha was safe, Jimmy headed out. He saw Ben Price, and Jimmy knew that he was caught. He says it doesn't make much difference now, and what he actually means by that is he just lost everything he cared about. So going to jail would be nothing worse than how he feels about losing Annabelle. In our resolution, Ben Price surprises the reader as well as Jimmy by saying that he doesn't know Jimmy. Ben saw what Jimmy gave up, how he saved Annabelle, and that he had been leading a straight life. He knew that the pain Jimmy felt would be worse than anything Ben or the government could do for him. Ben also protected the Adamses by not admitting that they had let a criminal into their midst. So I hope you enjoyed this story. Let me know if you have any questions. Great job, guys.